great discussions already this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are. As I've mentioned and as Walter outlined in the previous introduction, so we'll be discussing the assault on science. Today, the workshop will be essentially split in a couple of sections, but the first one, in the first one, Walter will give us insights on the very item we're against essentially here. So talking about how science is threatened and what are the assault on science. In the second and third section of the workshop, we'll dive into what we should start to do coming from that. And I'll reintroduce a bit the items that were discussed, which I briefly outlined regarding the science policy group meeting that happened in November, so a couple of months away from now, a couple of months ago, sorry. And then we'll build on that with the current situation and also with within this on politics framing and discussions that we'll have. So I'll let you start right away, Walter, with your first point, and I'll jump back with the slides on the process for the workshop afterwards, so that way we'll not switch back and forth between the slides. So go ahead whenever you see fit, Walter.
Thank you very much. Can you confirm that you see my screen?
Yes, we see your first page.
As I said before, science is under siege, and essentially this is because political forces are undermining expertise, dismantling research institutions, and replacing evidence-based policymaking with ideology. And this is happening mostly against the will of large part of the electorate. And this is happening in US with the Trump administration, as well as in Europe with different countries such as Hungary, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and some parties in the European Parliament, mostly on the populist and the right-wing part of the parliament. They are attempting to dramatically cut back on public health, science, and higher education and democracy. I must say that honestly, they were very clear. I mean, I regularly teach in the United States, and on July 18, 2024, I warned my colleagues and say, I mean, if these people are going to be elected, you are going to have serious problems. They are openly declaring that the professors are the enemy and that we have to honestly and aggressively attack the university in this country. And the reply was really, we don't have to worry. I mean, we have a lot of checks and balance. American university are very strong. And then you are over pessimistic. And at the end of the day, I received a lot of calls recently that something different is happening. And why do authoritarians attack university and scientists? Because science threatens ideological control and the single narrative that this kind of governments want to have. Because science is the antithesis to disinformation, because science promotes collaboration and internationalism, which is exactly opposite to the populism and sovereignty. And because universities have long played pivotal role in resisting to autocracy, this has happened in many countries in Europe. I mean, if you think about Hungary, the Czech Republic, but also in Serbia and in other parts of the world. How do that attack university and scientists? They try first to undermine the independence of university and to suppress dissent. How do they do that? Removing state funding, capturing leadership, attacking other sources of income, deporting, arresting, clamping down on protest. And they try to control science to align with state ideology, suppressing science that runs against ideology. And this is particularly evident in some fields, such as climate change and climate science, vaccines, social determinants of health, capturing scientific institutions and restricting international cooperation. And public health is particularly vulnerable to populist right-wing governments. Why is that? Because it's a threat to corruption and industrial exploitation of resources and population that often accompanies autocracy, because tackles the social determinants of health that these people hate: inequalities, environment, food, alcohol, tobacco, vaccines, and because needs to work with and advocate for most of marginalized communities. What's happening in USA, we have already realized yesterday with Adam relation with the agency, the federal agencies. I mean, the restructuring federal agencies, including the CDC, indiscriminate funding and personal cuts, reducing global health engagement with the retreat by WHO from WHO and the USAID. I mean, I just mentioned two topics which can be incredibly dangerous for the consequences of this choice. I mean, limiting fluoride in drinking water and limiting access to vaccines. I mean, according to our colleagues in the US, removing fluoride from public drinking water may lead to millions more cavities in youth children. This study estimates. And what already happening for measles is evident, but this is just the beginning. If you think how the changes to the vaccination schedules have been carried out without any care of the needs of the population and of the evidence base supporting this kind of needs. But this is not only related to life science as a medical field. This is related to the science as a whole. I mean, the United States was a scientific powerhouse. Research spending at government institutions has been dramatically cut, and this is essentially leading the United States to become not anymore so powerful and so leading and so inspirational to the world as it was in the past. It lags very strongly behind China and European Union. And if you think that the interference of the government, and in particular of the US Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., that said during a podcast interviews that the Trump administration will stop government scientists from publishing their research in major medical journals unless those journals change dramatically is evident of the idiocy of this kind of approach. But this is already having a strong effect. I mean, if you keep the web page views per PhD programs by program country percentage change, the United States is going back concerning the research and web pages views inside or from the rest of the world. And this is going to have serious effects in harming the quality and the participation of the United States scientific communities to the international collaboration. And another very important field is the climate change. I mean, I don't have time to, I'm interested in this topic since 10 years. I've been working with the Pope in the encyclical Laudato Si to make essentially this topic a very important topic for the Holy Siege, and with colleagues coming from the IPCC and with different Nobel Prizes. And what's happening in the United States, that is the EPA will eliminate all limits on greenhouse gas emission from power plants, and the Trump administration has gone to war essentially against any and all efforts to limit climate change. The administration is also imposing a blockade against wind and solar projects, delaying or even revoking permits, whether or not these projects have received federal subsidies. And this is just crazy. I mean, and if you think that the Trump administration has even introduced a mascot collie in an attempt to make an extremely dirty fuel cute, I mean, you can imagine how the science has been treated in the domain of climate change. Of course, I believe that in general, the scientific community cannot remain passive. And in Europe, we know that European nations, having previously faced such threats from Italian fascism, Nazi Germany, and the Soviet Union, we know the story, how it goes. And we believe that we have an additional responsibility to support you, to inform you, to resist, and to reaffirm your commitment to evidence-based policymaking. I'm an amateur historian of World War II and of the Holocaust, so that's why I reacted so strongly. So maybe it's worthwhile for you to share a little part of my experience. I was the president, the top health chief in Italy from 2014 to 2018. And when Italians elected a government which is very similar ideologically to what Trump today is, so a right-wing and populist government, very strongly anti-scientific and anti-science and anti-evidence, I resigned. But I not only resigned, I organized a resistance. And this was focused in an editorial by The Lancet on scientific leadership. Of course, Richard Horton is British, and he compared the kind of reactions that I animated in Italy with the reactions that was lacking in the United Kingdom concerning Brexit. And his editorial opened with the sentence, "Weakness is the only fault that we are incapable of correcting." And the failures of Britain's and medical scientific community to organize against the historic tragedy of Brexit stands in stark contrast with the courage of some European networks. Italy elected populist coalition governments. The result has been an unprecedented assault on science. Policies that have ranged from anti-vaccination to pro-racism last year led one of Italy's scientific leaders to resign the presidency of Italian National Research Organization. And this is not only what I did, but I animated in collaboration with one of the most important newspaper, which is being comparable to the New York Times in the United States. Together with a group of Italian researchers, we published a manifesto for creating a unified list of Italian forces supporting Europe. The document is a call to actions. Europe's destiny is Italy's destiny, because at that time, Italy was essentially pushing to get out of Europe, similarly to what our United Kingdom colleagues didn't avoid. And that is essentially my sentence. For the first time since the post-war period, there is a concrete risk of civil and democratic regression in the heart of the West. The battle for democracy has begun. Ricciardi and his colleague criticized the Italian government for wasting public resources and cutting investments. Italy's regression is cultural as well as political attacks on women, on minorities, and on science. The proper response? It is necessary to build a list of united civic and political forces that reflects the great European political families. And we set out 6 priorities. And you know what happened? We won. Essentially, we stopped all this kind of attitude, and we resisted in a way that the following governments appointed me as chief scientific advisor during the pandemic. And this kind of attitude, I think, is necessary where this kind of attempts happens. And we need to support the new generation of courageous leaders who are willing to challenge the status quo, advocate for evidence-based solutions, and inspire collective actions with a strong community-supported narrative toward a healthier and more resilient future. And we must create a structured network to support these actions. And Stefan will be discussing later. This is essentially the topic of today. You may be familiar with this Dov Seidman, how managing complex change. I believe that we must have all the 5 ingredients for making this kind of resistance successful. We must have a vision, skills, incentives, resources, and an action plan. And by proactively protecting research institutions, engaging the public, and fostering international collaboration, we can ensure that science remains a foundation for progress rather than a casualty for political expediency. I mean, we are all on the same page. We are mostly scientists. We know that science is not just about scientific publication, discovery, patents. It is the foundation of informed decision making, technological advancement, and better health. And I believe that as it was in Italy in 2018, the stakes could not be higher. If political forces had succeeded in Italy to dismantling the institutions, the cost would be measured as now is measured in deaths, despair, and the unraveling of democratic institutions in the United States. Now is the time for all of us to stand up for science before it is too late. And the future of our people, particularly the most vulnerable, are depending on our willingness to fight for it, not to mention about the planet that we have to defend. And I would like to conclude with an emotional call of the climate scientists that published the last report on state of climate report, Perilous Times on Planet Earth. I mean, this is the last sentence of the paper. This is our moment to make a profound difference for all life on Earth. We must embrace it with unwavering courage and determination to create a legacy of change that will stand the test of time. So again, the word courage, the most important virtue, because it precedes all the other virtues. And I believe that this has not the only way to do that. We have to build a structured organization to support it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Walter, to have framed it so well. Important message. It takes courage, and it takes also something that will stand the test of time. It's not just a one-shot thing. It's really, or just one response on social media. It's really a long-lasting structure that that needs to be built, and that's essentially the effort of the workshop. So thank you very much. Um, I will share my screen. So here as well, just for the starter. So essentially, we'll talk about building resilient institution to advance truth. That's the core of the discussion. So after this really eloquent intro, Walter, on science under siege in many ways, you've given the example of what's happening in the USA, and the fact that in Europe you have been facing such critical times. And that's also, my point is, that's also spreading now around the globe in different instances and different ways. But this is an important and transformational time right now. So as scientists, as groups that are touching on science, and whether it's for public health, whether it's for pure science, applied science, like myself, just to give a background, I'm an engineer by trade, working as a professor at the University of McGill University, but also working with the UN on many projects that requires to have science pure and applied to be used correctly, take, taking the proper decision, emphasizing the proper ways to help mitigate risk for the people in many ways, from climate to health hazards and occupational health risk. So today, the idea is to move beyond the diagnosis and start to work on institutional architecture. Um, uh, Walter started up with mapping, in fact, these pressures we see, these coordinated pressure. That's important here. It's not just accidentally pressurizing the system. It's more organized than that. So to respond to such an organized assault, set of assaults, it needs an organization, an organized way on the other side. It's a complex system, as Walter referred to, so it needs a response accordingly. Um, so we'll touch on a couple of items and question today, and in a minute or two, I'll start asking you to come back with how you see and what you see should be done. So we might want to emphasize on where the pressure are coming from, and how do these vulnerabilities that they're highlighting or outlining, how do they interact? And what's from your standpoint, what weakens these scientific, whether it's the autonomy, independence of the scientists mostly, but also on the governance of institutions, not only the people, the individuals, but also the structures that are supposed to support them, whether it's from funding cuts, as mentioned on this slide, whether it's from disinformation that causes a lot of volatility. So this second, so funding one part, volatility is really the other point. And it's not like accidental volatility, it's really cause and disinformation. There is an ecosystem of disinformation right now that's happening. Walter, you touch on the climate side, we touch on the pandemic side. And when we look at the actors, some of them are in all these things. So it's an ecosystem. So they're kind of tied and working together. And that causes this third item you see on the slide. So erosion of public trust. So because of this flood of information, good information and disinformation, the public starts to lose full trust on everything that's received. So we need to find ways to restructure this public trust. And then there is a super big fragmentation between science and policy. Um, so many US example at the moment, but there are examples in other countries, in mine, Canada, in others in Europe, in Asia as well. So there is a big fragmentation. So policies and science are starting to go in different direction. And that's causing, all these things are causing the systemic pattern and the pressure that science is feeling. Science in with the big S here, but also the individuals and the infrastructure. Um, before we get into further, just want to wrap up on some of the items that were relayed during the Science Policy Group meeting in November for those who weren't there, and even for those who were there, just to give a sense of what was discussed. Um, in fact, what was outlined is the challenge is definitely structural, not episodic. So it's just, as I said, not one shot, one social post at a time. No, it's really bigger than that. It's affecting directly institutional resilience, and to build that and to rebuild or build resilience for those institutions that we're not having proper resilience. We need the design. It will not fall like a resilient piece in by accident. There is also communication asymmetry. So it favors disinformation. Eric Fegelding at the time was talking about this. So they're really efficient, those pushing disinformation and making sure that it gets to where it needs to get from their standpoint. It's not as efficient from the science part. So it's like really difficult to have the message going in. So we need to address that as well. So how it can be translated into something the public and the authorities are receiving and doing correct things after that. Um, so for trust building as well, it requires infrastructure. I mentioned it. That was definitely addressed during this. I think Sunil, you touched on this at the time. And last thing, it needs coordination, but an adaptive coordination because things are changing so fast, moving so fast. Adaptation is definitely a key feature in this infrastructure that we'll need to build, and that was one of the conclusions. More specifically on the disinformation side, there was this in fact this coordinated or funded, I would say, even disinformation was seen from many speakers at the time, either from the science communication side, so there is misinformation even coming from the science communication side. Also, there is academic incentive that undervalue the public engagement. That was an interesting point at the time. So the academics way to work right now is not making sure that the public will be part of it. So it's like more giving science to the public rather than having the public participating in it. Not necessarily because the public will be in the lab and doing purposes that works directly, I would say, on the very scientific things. It's more like science needs to address public good, needs to address what's important for the public, whether it's from the safety standpoint, the health standpoint, or others. So it needs to be felt by the public that science is not completely detached in another world, another planet, another universe. It's part of the society. Science is part of the whole system. So anyway, and so it needs a structured communication infrastructure, at least for this, but maybe for many other things. That was relayed as well. The big question was not only an infrastructure for communication, but something that will be building trust. Because it's not fully lost right now, but definitely the science part of it is losing the war to keep trust with the public in general, and sometimes within, if not more and more times, with the authorities, those who should be protecting the people. So anyway, you have the other point. So whether it's on the cultural side, on the public communication, PR, even the PR side was addressed at the time. So it's not well treated. Okay, so let's start with the discussion now. So there are a couple of, so Walter came up with a couple of items that we are seeing right now in the world. I just want to see if some of you would see other things that needs to be addressed in terms of vulnerabilities. So here we're interested in developing a structure that will resist this pressure. So like for any type of chain, the weakest spot might break first. So we need to evaluate which parts are the more vulnerable. So where are these vulnerabilities? Is it from the governance structure? We've talked about governance on Monday. Um, so is this the funding security here, meaning the fact that the and that's what we're seeing in many countries in the US indeed right now. Funding of infrastructure or institutions are kind of a Damocles sword on top of these. So if you want to keep these funding, then you do that way, this way. You cut that word. You don't use this concept. You cut DEI program, whatever it is. Okay, so funding is another vulnerabilities. Um, the review systems, our and dividend standards. So how do we make sure that it's an ongoing process? So it looks like as soon as we build an infrastructure, it's like for eternity. And I'm involved in the UN as I say, but the UN was created 80 years ago. That's another topic that was there, but it would have needed to evolve much faster. It is in the process of transformation right now, but it took a long time. So whatever infrastructure we think of, it needs to be having this capacity to review and adjust in a much faster way, and then build the ecosystem, the communication ecosystem, and this tie with the public. That's another place where there might be vulnerabilities. But I don't know if anybody wants to jump in. I will from time to time open either on the chat. So I'm trying to follow the chat at the same time. Not an easy thing. So if anyone wants to give in at some point or raise hand. So if I've not seen anything, so I've seen two raise hand, but I'm not able to open this to see which one. Um,
Greg, please go
uh,
ahead.
Okay, Greg. Thank you, Yanir. I don't know why I wasn't seen. And I seen Sunil after that. So, Greg, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. And I apologize for not having the visual. I'm in rural Oregon and our Wi-Fi is a little fuzzy right now. But
No problem.
what I wanted to say is about social relevance and public good.
Hmm.
Certainly
Good
science
point.
is facing its most draconian time of all time, perhaps, right now, but it's been in existence for a long time. And I can give you two examples in my own life. One 30 years ago, where I went in forestry, which is one of my topics, where I went to the H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest, which is 10 miles away from me, the oldest and largest Forest Service experimental forest station in the country. And there was a seminar on how do we create structural diversity in a plantation. And I raised my hand and I said, "Excuse me, but why did you have to destroy that diversity in the first place in order to try to bring it back? Isn't that like we have to kill the village in order to save it?"
Mm.
And it's that kind of totally disjointed thinking and irrelevant science to the public good that has been perpetuated in spades, in my experience, for 45 years. Another example 20 years ago was that I gave a paper for the National Roundtable on Sustainable Forests in DC, and the majority of authors who spoke at that said that the target of sustainable forestry is the simultaneous, and that's critical, simultaneous integration of environmental health, economic vitality, and social equality. It's never gotten any airtime. And I, who am nobody, have tried to push it for the last 21 years, can't get to first base. So to ask the question of science, how is this scientific inquiry socially relevant, should be the first question, I believe, of science, period. And I think we've gotten way off track, and the roots go back a long time. Thank you.
That's a good comment. So and yes, it needs to come back to what's relevant. And you're right. It's there was some sort of split between. That's what I was referring to. But your example are great to that very point. Sunil, you wanted to add something.
I think I extend the same argument. I believe science has lost its democratic credentials. So science is more authoritarian now. And some of this is a structural flaw with science that has crept over a period of time. The science I do is better than the science you do. This is something which has come into science. It was never there. Science initially was thought to be for the public good, based on inquiry, which was needed at that point in time, and we fulfilled that need. But over a period of time, hierarchy built into it, methods built into it, and the democratic concept of science waned off. The knowledge building process lost its meaning itself. uh, I always assumed science as a puzzle building process, so something like a puzzle building, a dynamic process. And you will fill in the puzzle will move upwards, you will start filling in the second part of the puzzle. But at this point in time, I don't see it happening like that. I have had a talk with Yanir someday for maybe half an hour. And once we start saying that this is the way science has to be done, the unfalsifiability, things like that, the structures have to be like that. I think the purpose of science has defeated itself. Structures don't define the benefit of the public. The public good will never ever be defined alone by the structures itself. I
Hmm.
continue saying I'm at the cost of being called called as unscientific. We in India, I believe we in India have been benefited a lot as a civilization, as a human race, have benefited a lot from time-tested beliefs than the scientific methodologies that are used to create scientific evidence for those beliefs. So
Hmm.
unless and until we build in that democracy of knowledge creation and science, I think we will always be worried because it actually multiplies. I give an example. On my own, I will never ever be able to publish in a journal like Nature. I don't have the money to publish in a journal like Nature, despite the fact that I may have a very brilliant research work. I may not be able to publish in Lancet. I may not be able to publish in BMJ because the amount of money that is required to publish
Hmm.
in these journals is my month's
Yes.
salary. So I won't opt for that. So my science won't be good because it doesn't find a meaning in nature, but it will work very wonderfully well for my own society. That's how I see it.
That's well said. And as Lynn said on the chat, it's we need to refocus on the values and the purpose. So because you're right, it was diverted towards money, as another said as well. So the point is, uh, in fact, probably we started by losing this public trust even before the rest broke. Okay, anyway, that's okay. That's another discussion. Adam, you wanted to add something? No, I think it's Jeffrey first and Adam second. Sorry, Jeffrey first.
Well, thank you. This is a terrific discussion and very relevant to having impact on the process. Uh, with regard to science, I would remind you that way back in the 18th century, one of the Puritan ministers in Massachusetts promoted variolation, and his house was firebombed.
Mm,
So this reaction to science is built into society and human nature long time, not to mention Galileo and all that stuff. Um, but I think that I have been living through a case study of your paradigm. I'm in Santa Cruz. I've been working with the faculty at the University of California, which is suffering both from withdrawal support for their postdocs as well as research grants. And the coordinating group includes a bunch of professors, including a Nobel Prize winner, and they have no purchase. They have practical problems because they are working through the faculty senate, but they have not united with the graduate students or the undergraduates to have access and authority and influence. They did appeal to the chancellor of the provost of the university, and she said the chancellor has told us to keep our head down and not participate. And this is in spite of the fact the state of California passed a law that said state universities could not obey the Trump regulations. So the practicalities of this are very difficult, but your paradigm helps a tremendous amount.
yes, definitely. Whoops, time seeing. Okay, good. Thank you, Jeffrey, for that. Um, And by the way, I saw you you wanted to participate in the discussions later on. I will open for everybody that wants to join in. It's today. It's one session, but that will continue. Just so okay to let you know. Adam, you can come with your comment or idea.
Thank you. This has been great. 2 points. I mentioned this yesterday. The concept of viewpoint diversity is being used as a sort of tit for tat by the other side at this point. And I just feel strongly that the response should be, uh, on the one hand, yeah, diversity in all ways is generally a good thing, but if it's a code word for we need more mediocrity, we need more fringe views in the faculty and the student body, in the people we honor. I think there's got to be a principled way to draw that line. Uh, More importantly, I think in my career, the strongest frustration I felt is the uh, use of science and economics as a bludgeon by people who uh, advertise it as value free and a superior alternative to value laden science and economics. And I think that's a tremendous hoax. The example I would always come back to is that the average value, the expected value, is sometimes a reasonable way to deal with scientific or economic uncertainty, but it's exactly as value laden as any other way of managing that uncertainty. And so my example is the person who would applaud themselves for arriving 4 minutes late to the airplane, having arrived 5 minutes early the last time, and say we're getting closer to a good prediction is nuts. But they're using expected value decision making exactly the way it is supposed to be used. So I think we need to come back in the game when we can and not say that we're going to move the needle back to something that's superior or that is value neutral. We believe our values are, in a real sense, better than the anti-precautionary values, and we should be willing to say so and why.
Yes, absolutely. We need to make sure that the public understands that these values is for good reasons. Yeah, you're right. That's a key point. Um, Robert, and just a second, Walter, if you want to jump in, you have a free pass to jump in anytime. You started the discussion, so don't hesitate. Okay, Robert, that's your turn.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to start by endorsing what Adam just said, and I'd like to connect it back to the earlier discussion about trust. And at the last Unpolitics meeting, we made a distinction between being trustworthy and demanding trust. To talk to people and say, trust me, I think invites distrust. And related to Adam's comment, I think there has been a lot of bludgeoning around the issue of trust. I know better than you, and you should follow me. And that's a real challenge, I think, for moving back to and building a more effective arrangement for the use of science. And I think we can't demand trust. It just, that won't work. We can try to be trustworthy, and we can work on the things that cause distrust in the first place.
Absolutely, Robert. You're coming up with a very important point. Trust cannot be asked for. You cannot buy trust. You cannot demand trust. Trust is some sort of, it's deserved, and it needs to, you need to have done things, and that will build up trust. Trust is not appearing by accident because it's asked for, because it's paid for, whatever. So and that's where science missed it. It's because for decades it has not made anything for people to trust it. So whenever someone comes with misinformation that looks trustful or whatever, it jumped on that because the other side was kind of separated from. So you're jumping on a very important point. Trust, it cannot be. You cannot get people to be trusting something, science, whatever, in a day. It needs to have been coming from something. So that's essentially one of the core questions today. Thank you for that point. I had other slides just to feed the discussion, but you're already feeding it without any point. Um, uh, One of the point was on the autonomy related to governance. I don't think it's as important as the trust question we just talked about, but this is also related in some way. So I think at least on one side, so science right now looks like it's trying, and I'm saying science with a big S. It can be institutions, it can be people, it looks like it requires money. Okay, always looking for money, and that's in some sort normal because you need money to make whatever science is asking for. But because of that, there are compromises that are made. I just mentioned a couple, and I think Walter touched on that as well. So, and it looks from the public standpoint that it's definitely misaligned with their needs. It's more like scientists or institutions, infrastructure are trying to save themselves rather than doing things that will serve the public. And that's a very quick way to build mistrust. Okay, that's the opposite, Robert, of what you said. So people start to see that, oh, these science, whatever people are working for themselves and they're working to save their job. They're working to save whatever the infrastructure, not to make sure that the public is safe and that people are, and the health is considered in the proper way, not in the wrong way. And the precautionary principle is used in the good direction, not in reverse. So it doesn't look like that. But for some exceptions, I'm happy to see today a lot of these exceptions around this virtual table, but I think we're in the exceptions rather than in the general thing. So how can we make that a bit further aligned? That was the question here. I will switch to the other question, but anybody that wants to jump in, I'll come back. The other point was and it goes in the direction of what you just mentioned, Robert. It's not that we can have trust coming in tomorrow. We need to have an infrastructure in place, and the generic infrastructure here in place that will slowly or more quickly, but that will, with time, build this trust. It's something that needs to be gained with time. It's not something that you get because you're asked for. That's why I like your comment, Robert, so much. And right now, at the same time as we need to do that, there is this big disinformation network that is super efficient at destroying trust. Okay, so really, really good, just by flooding. Okay, this pandemic of of too much information coming in, from flat earth to climate denial to pandemic, in fact, anti-vax, anti-mask, anti-whatever. So people are flooded by that. So, and even if they're not becoming anti-vax, as soon as they start to get every messages from all across the board, it starts to be difficult. So it's a challenge. So even if we know that trust is key, how can we do that while it's attacked continuously? So the point is right now, and that's the second level of discussion I would like us to get in, is I think the problem is a super big fragmentation, and that's a term I say but that was discussed in the last SPG meeting, and even in the On Politics previously meeting. So fragmentation at different levels. So as soon as science is under attack, there should be some sort of rallying the wagon, okay, to protect the science. But right now it's everybody by itself. Everybody try to save its own spot, and it's fragmented on any level we can think, from funding to authorities to the structure themselves to communication and to responsibilities. While we should try to work and build a coherent system. Okay, the only way to resist to such an assault is to build coherence and build resilience under pressure. So, anyone has thoughts or reflection on that? Just before we switch to the next item, where we'll be going is defining how. Then how we're. So, if there is,
Stefan,
then I'm
if you
just
if
yes.
you don't
Go ahead.
mind, I want to show a picture
Yes, I
because
will just move. Yeah. Okay. Exactly.
can you see this picture?
Yes.
Essentially, what I did is to propose to the regional director of the World Health Organization that you can see here a
Mm-hmm.
meeting in Copenhagen of the chief medical officers of the number one of the ministries of health of the European Union, plus Norway, Iceland, and Switzerland. And so we convened in Copenhagen, and essentially I made a presentation very similar to the one that I mentioned before, encouraging to have a less fragmented organization. So the reception by the chief medical officer was enthusiastic. So the idea to have
Awesome.
a common place where to essentially fight together, be informed together. But unfortunately, the initiative was stuck because of lack of funding. So there was even the money to organize a following meeting. I mean, this is just to give you an idea. So in principle, we have a kind of already established group of chief medical officers willing, even in countries such as Hungary, the Slovak Republic, and the Czech Republic, to intervene somehow. Of course, they were silent during the meeting, but they were very open to collaboration. So that's the kind of solution. So I strongly believe that philanthropic organization or other organizations can be funding this kind of infrastructures if it's possible in Europe and the rest of the world.
That's a very good example. That's why if this fragmentation. So you showed an example where people can aggregate and agree on the big principle. They need also the rest of the support on the infrastructure. So if it's fragmented here but not there, maybe we already have a pathway, but it needs something, whether it's a charity or something, as you mentioned. That's awesome. So thanks for the example. Dorothy, you wanted to add something, so I'll let you go ahead, and we'll then switch
Yeah,
to the section
just
two. And
related.
Joe after you. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Stefan. Just related partly to the fragmentation is the idea of silos and solidarity, and how do we bring together or ensure solidarity amongst those who are in silos. And I don't know, maybe it's because of my training that I know a little about a lot and a lot about a little. I recognize, for example, that I've learned from you, Stefan, around ventilation, even though I took a course in it. But it seems to me that part of the issue here, I'm not talking about the economic forces at all, which are a big deal, is and that what Walter was talking about with the bringing people together, how that idea of making a point of breaking down the silos and trying to figure out where there are overlaps in interest and goals, and then there's also, as Lynn says in the chat, that then how do you mix that with people who are trained about communication?
Yeah, that's effectively that. Communication is another point where we need to defragment and find support. Thank you, Dorothy. Yeah, absolutely right. Joe, and then we'll switch to the
I'll try and be
design
quick.
part.
We've talked a lot about organization and money, and that the anti-science group have a lot of
Of those.
well organized and are well funded, and that's not accidental. That's because the people that have the money as you pointed out at the beginning of your talk, see benefit in destroying the scientific consensus and the trust in science. And so therefore they fund organizations like the Cato Institute, the Brownstone Institute, the American Enterprise Institute. These are all very well funded. And, when you say we need to have a charity put money forward into this, there's just not a bunch of billionaire philanthropists that want to support this because it's not in their best interest. And I think that's a key solution that we need to figure out how to solve.
You're absolutely right. But I think we have a tool that they might not have or they might not use as much. Yes, they have the billionaires that will support, but maybe if we use system thinking correctly, okay, maybe we could do things as efficient as they're doing, but with a lower cost in resources and means and people. That's where we need to go. If we try to reproduce their ways, which is already really robust, as you've pointed out, Joe, they're super well funded. They have super big organizations, equivalent of billions of dollars in this. Definitely a group of science interested in science people, some scientists and to the public, would never get these billions to play with. But using, as I said, science thinking, we might find ways. That's the idea here. We need to think about that. With this tool right here, we can find ways to do that efficiently, and that would cost money, time, whether probably less if we're efficient enough. So anyway, thank you, Joe, for this comment. So Sunil and then Nicolas.
I just see a sort of contradiction in it. If I take the discussion from what we saw yesterday or what we spoke about yesterday, we wanted to be on the table wherein the decisions regarding science are being taken across the world, or the decisions for the public good in terms of science are being taken. And the table is already full of those people who have the money. We all know who runs the health scenario across the world, or the science on health is dictated by whom across the world, and yet they have the money on our side. And we wanted to be a part of that group also to decide on the science that is being communicated to the public. So I see that apparent contradiction in it. Uh, we want to be on that side with those people who decide on the science, but money is on their side. And yet we want to be opposite to them and speak of science. So that contradiction somehow fails me.
That's really a contradiction, Sunil, but that's a paradigm, I would say more precisely. So maybe we can think out of the box and find another way to be part of the discussion with this group that we discussed in the last few days, but in a different way. That's not calling for the billions to be supporting it. That was my point. So there is effectively a contradiction if we do the things the same way the others are doing. But if we take it from a different lens, different position, different ways, maybe, and that's the thing to discuss and find. Not necessarily today. What I will discuss in the coming minutes after we close on this second section is how we do start on putting things in place. And so thank you, Sunil, for that comment. Nicola, you have a comment.
Hi, Stefan. So just quickly regarding the aspect of funding is, I work with a lot of businesses, and I would say that initiatives that actually are aligned with public health do get funded. For instance, you look at medical devices, where a lot of startups developing medical devices, developing new tools, new inventions, they get funding from investors in order to promote and to push the technology. It's just that they have a product that they're actually sort of saying can ultimately generate some revenues. So I think that it depends what exactly an organization that is pro public health is trying to sell. What is it? What's the message? What's the brand? What exactly is the ethos of that organization? But I mean, your companies that develop pharmaceuticals, businesses that stem from universities developing new treatments. A lot of them do get funding if the funding works. They get a lot of money for that. So it's just, I don't know. I think that the money is there, provided that the actual messaging or the way that the organization is framed is properly framed.
Absolutely, you're right. So anyway, we'll need to better understand how they're working, because we'll need to find ways to apply what's correct and not apply what's not. But thank you for that perspective. because we're at the start of the design phase, think of it like more like introduction of things rather than the core. And we'll need to touch on many aspects, and that's what was discussed at the SPG. So 7 dimensions were identified, which you can translate into 7 work groups. These work groups touch on different things from mapping, from analyzing the situation, to governance aspects, as I've shown earlier, but also how we could touch on funding and funding security. That makes many science infrastructure and scientists themselves kind of compromise themselves to survive in this new world. But if we would find ways to support, that could be another way. Anyway, you see the 7 aspects, from communication to counter disinformation, and civic educational infrastructure. When we're talking about building trust with public, we need to find ways to reach out to them and make sure they understand that the science is there to support, to help. It's there for public good. That's not super well captured at the moment. And then structure, the coordination, the implementation backbone, what they call it. The backbone here is definitely the structure that will allow all these um, group to aggregate, a bit like your example, Walter, with the WHO, the people that met. Um, you have the people, that's already something absolutely great. Now the backbone, the infrastructure, the implementation would need to be set for these and other groups to work together and more efficiently. So here you see this QR code is essentially for anybody that wants to jump in any of these groups. And Yanir, I'm in the 15 last minutes where you always ask us to go into practical stuff. So I want to show that first because for those who want, and I'll re-show it later on. I have just a couple of other slides. But the thing I would have liked us to do also today is to see, coming from what was defined a couple of months ago, if you see other subset work groups or adaptation of these work groups should be done. All these are there as, think of it like the table is set, but we can move the tools, we can move the plates, we can adjust them, we can even change the meal if it's necessary. Think of it like a starter rather than the end result. So this is how they were defined. And it's an open thing because what we need to do is to get into this further into this design phase. I just put examples of things that could be done here, but we have so many other things. It's more to feed the discussions than as kind of closing arguments here. It's necessary that this will be discussed in these subgroups, and this work that we discussed today, really just a starter. So the most important thing is for you to identify in these groups which one you would be interested in working on. You can give your name here, and then they will be built out of the people that are there. Sometimes they might join forces, these groups. Sometimes they might work and then regroup at certain point. But the idea is to build this infrastructure that will indeed help us build trust, the trust in science, and also build the infrastructure that resists this pressure. That's not finished yet. The pressure is there for a long time. And also to apply this system thinking approach, complex system, if you prefer as well. So this is to use the tools that we are having at hand right now, not the billions, because we all know here that we don't have billions that we will be able to play with. So we cannot play according to the same rules as these big lobby groups, Joe, that you mentioned earlier. So they have their tools because they have the money. We need to think in other ways. We need to build trust with other means than disinformation or other things because they can pay for that. Here will not be having these structure. So I don't know if anybody wants. I'm not seeing any hand raised right now, but I see a couple of message.
There is a post in the chat that enables
Okay.
you to sign up for those groups. Vincent,
Yes.
so there's a forum where people can participate in these projects, in these project teams. And of course, people are welcome to sign up. And we are
the plan is to follow up on this efforts through coordinating these groups. Uh, uh,
And these group, I can re-show the rest is just to establish a sustained collaboration, but these groups are here. So I just showed them earlier, Yanir. So those who have your phone, you can just, Lynn said that I'm not on full screen. It looks like it's full screen here. Do you see my screen in full screen? Is it sufficient for the QR code?
If you click to open the window, right now we see your desktop with the Google Doc and so on, rather than this as a solo.
Oh, okay. Sorry for that. It's not the Google Doc I wanted to share. It's really that's why you weren't seeing. You should see my presentation rather than the Google Doc.
Now it's there.
Okay, so that's what I was talking about for these minutes. So the QR code is here. And this is the 7 resilient tracks for action that were defined at the SPG. So sorry for the issue on the screen, but essentially that's the tracks that will be the starting point. As I said, they can change over time. Some are more related to analysis, others are more working on mechanism, as it's said here. Others would touch on structure and funding, or even further on infrastructure. And here, infrastructure, we're not talking about building bricks and mortar. We're really talking about how we can approach from the communication side. As you mentioned, Dorothy, that's already there. Communication is a key item here, and how we can build and start to rebuild this public trust that's missing right now. And then also define systems that would touch on some sort of counter disinformation. So I repeat myself because you were not having this slide earlier, and that's what was called at the time of the SPG the truth defense. So sorry, and in Great Britain it's S, in US it's C, or vice versa. As a Canadian, I'm always mixed up. So the point is, the counter disinformation is more inactive things to kind of counter the disinformation, while here it's really the public trust. So that's the long-term thing I was talking about. And then talking about the public, building an educational infrastructure, so making it more organized rather than just spot checks done by this scientist, this professor, something that is more comprehensive and touches on many things, because it will build trust at the same time as helping on the public side to educate and give more information. So it will serve these two purposes at the same time. So that's one. And finally, this backbone item I was referring to. So coordination, implementation, working with different groups and making sure there is interconnections, and then they're able to work together. That would be a way to compensate for the lack of billions of dollars. Okay, so anyway, so that's the 7 groups. That's the QR code. As Yanir said, it's also on the link is also on the chat already. So whoops. I was towards the end, so unless there's some comment or anything that would need to be discussed, since we're in the last 4 or 5 minutes, I don't see other comments yet. So since the assault on science is a coordinated thing, it's not accidental, as Walter said in his presentation at the beginning, and as many of you highlighted as well, with different examples that are coming from different ways. Science is and will function under stress, and it's not finished yet. Okay, so institution needs to withstand this pressure, and I'll continue with the rest, but I'll let you, Joe, give your point before I'm closing. So let's go ahead. We still have a few minutes. Joe, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just desperately trying to find the book that I want to recommend, and it's by Oreskes, Naomi Oreskes, and it's called, there's actually a movie too. Sorry guys, you were too fast in calling me out. But
I can
I
come
highly
back and
recommend it.
give you back. Okay, go ahead.
Merchants of Doubt.
Merchants of Doubt, yeah.
How a
Yes,
handful of
that's it.
scientists obscured the truth on issues from tobacco smoke to climate change, and it
Mm.
lays out the strategies and the tools that have been used over and over and over again to obscure the truth to advantage the corporate world. And as I
Yes.
say, there's a TV show on it as well on Netflix. But I highly recommend if people want to dig into some of the details. It's a very well written, very factual book that lays out the playbook here.
Absolutely. That's a good, very good example
I'll
of
put
that. So, okay. But anyway, I think Greg wants to add something, and I saw you appearing, Dorothy. I don't know, but Greg, first, your hand is raised, so just
Yeah,
go ahead.
yes, thank you again. Um, a couple thoughts. One is that I'm reminded of Einstein's quote, "You can't solve a problem with the same thinking that's created it." And it seems that that is very true today as it was when he said it, that our ability to put things in the context of dollars and cents, but not in terms of hope for future generations,
Mm,
not in terms of being good ancestors on any level, not in terms of what should be our fundamental purpose. And I think that we have really gotten away from the essence. And there's a great book called Consilience by E.O. Wilson, where he talks about we are drowning in data while starving for wisdom. How many people can even talk about what wisdom is or looks like or tastes like or evolves? How does it evolve? We
mm,
are, the signs are so clear with our kids killing kids at school
mm,
that we have failed in our most basic purpose. And if we don't address that, and if we do, people will join. If we
mm.
can create a positive vision integrated that has meaning for their life, it will be like the 100th monkey. But I
Mm.
think that we need to really evaluate whether or not we are trying to repackage the 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 chairs on the deck of the Titanic or not. Thank you.
Yes, nice image. Clear, clear and sound. Thank you. Lynn, you want to add something? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's in line with what was just said. There's no deficit of information out there.
Yes,
So
exactly.
it's not about getting the message out. It's about getting the message in. And to think that science alone will convince people does not work. That's why I was talking about pain points.
Yes.
So what matters to the person in front of you may not be the same thing that matters to you. And speaking about what matters to you will fail each time. But if you focus on what matters, for example, for parents who don't want to be at home looking after sick kids, who want their kids to succeed and be in school, then that's where the pain point or the win is. And so it's really about crafting the message for the audience and not thinking that we're the trusted messenger. We're not. It may be a religious leader, it may be somebody in a certain community. And so I think we're at the point where developing relationship with trusted messengers in those community to at least understand what moves them and what will make a difference. And I posted in the chat a movie that really made the point that the Children Health Defense and all these other organizations were prepping for years for the moment of the
Hmm.
pandemic. They were ready. This was their big show. And so we have a lot of catch up to do.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And that's why in this slide I'm writing, we're not here to defend science, especially episodically. So defending science would still look like we're turning on ourselves as a scientist and as a science buddy. It's not that. We need to build system that will serve the people, that works for public good. Science will get better, well, will get trusted down the road because that will serve people, not the other way around. Not defending science is, as you just said, there's a lot of things out there that says science is good. Earth is not flat, it's spherical. People don't need to hear that another time. Why would it, is it important? So, for the people, how it can serve the people, and how the system can survive the pressure. Because if they don't, they'll not go very far. Anyway, so I think we're towards the end, Yanir. Anyway, you're all invited to contribute and give your name. So this QR code you see on the right is more like a list of these things that were defined, the tracks I was talking about, and then it will just start to build up, and we'll need to have this group defining what's important to discuss, at even adjusting, as I said earlier, from everything from the title to the core, defining leads, defining objectives, and all coming back to building something. It's an institutional evolution that's writing something transformative, because science as it is right now, it's first not well received in the public, but second, it's not serving well the public. So it's not just the billionaires and all those that are attacking the problem. The problem is within. So that was the key point I wanted you to get as well. It's not just those who are attacking. The assault on science is from outside and from within. That's important that we change the paradigm. Okay, I think it's all. Yanir, I just give you back the microphone, and
Thank you for the summary. And again, I think the topics today and the discussions are super important. And again, the key here is that we're looking for how to move this forward. This is not something that we're going to address tomorrow. I think Walter did an amazing job of pointing to directions that we could move, and Stefan summarized in a broad sense some of the key dimensions of what we need to do. I think that there's plenty of information about steps that we can take now, but the question, as we said before, is which ones are we ready to advance now, and participation is essential for us to do so.